I'm Katie from the Blog Hearts Content Farmhouse, and today we are going to be making a really soft and sweet loaf of bread, just like the Hawaiian bread that you find at the grocery store. This is a recipe that I made up trying to imitate that bread. It's not exactly the same, but it does give you that same really sweet, really soft bread that's great for slicing up for sandwiches or good for shaping into rolls to serve with dinner or for making little sandwich buns. If you're familiar with baking bread, this recipe is going to be really easy. It's basically just make a yeast bread and shape it into rolls or into a loaf. If you've never made bread before, this is still an easy recipe. It follows the exact same steps that any yeast bread does. First, we are just going to dump all of our ingredients into the machine. There are a few special ingredients in this recipe that help the bread stay really soft. In my experience, potato flakes are one of those ingredients that really softens a loaf of bread. So does powdered milk, and so does adding an egg. Now, powdered milk you can find in the baking section, right where the flour and sugar is in your grocery store. You can also order it online. It's very inexpensive. Potato flakes seem unusual, and they are in the grocery store with, they are just boxed instant potatoes. They are flakes that people can reconstitute with water to make potatoes with. That's gross, but they're really good in bread recipes, especially for making a really moist loaf of bread. And since those Hawaiian rolls are really moist bread, I added that in here to help get the texture I was looking for. Another ingredient that's unusual to bread making is the pineapple juice. I was looking for that sweet tropical flavor that you find in those grocery store loaves, and this is what I settled on to help give it that flavor. It seems like a lot of sugar and a lot of pineapple juice, but it's not an overly sweet end result. Most bread does have some sugar in it. This has a little bit more, plus the sweetness of the pineapple juice, but it's still a really good bread for burgers and sandwiches. It's not too sweet at all. These ingredients, the amounts that I'm giving you is enough for one sandwich loaf of bread or for about 10 to 12 little rolls. So what I like to do is just double it, do a batch of rolls and a loaf of sandwich bread, and then I can freeze whichever one I'm not using right away. But obviously that's totally up to you. So the ingredients that we're gonna add into our bread machine or into our stand mixer are 1/4 cup of instant potato flakes, 3/4 of a cup of milk, anywhere between 1/3 of a cup and 1/2 of a cup of pineapple juice. So with any bread recipe, you start with the lower amount and work your way up if it needs it. 1.5 tablespoons of softened butter, 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3 cups of bread flour, and 2 teaspoons of instant yeast. If you don't have bread flour, this is one of those recipes where all-purpose flour is also going to work. It's not that important for the recipe. So you put everything into the bread machine or the stand mixer, let it do its work and knead everything thoroughly. If you don't have a bread machine and you want more tips on how to knead your dough in a stand mixer, I did just do a video on that you can check out. Go ahead and let that run, let it rise. Now, since this recipe has a lot of sweetener in it, it may seem to rise a little bit slower than what you're used to. So if the machine beeps to say that the dough cycle is complete, but the dough has not doubled in size, just leave that machine closed and come back and check it in about another 20 minutes and it should have doubled. It sometimes just needs that little bit of extra time. Now we are gonna go ahead and shape it. So this can be done either as a loaf of bread where you're gonna flatten it out into a rough rectangle, roll it up, pinch the seams, and then fold the ends underneath. Or you can just pinch it into little round roll shapes by pinching the bottoms of your loaf or pinching the bottoms of your roll and smoothing out the top. Once you do that, you wanna go ahead and brush either the buns or the loaf of bread with an egg white. That is gonna help it darken. It's already gonna darken pretty quickly because of all that sugar, but it also gives it a really pretty shine, just like the ones that you find at the store. So you brush the top of the loaf and then you cover it with either greased plastic wrap or a damp tea towel and let it rise in a warm place for 1 hour. Once it has doubled in bulk and it's nice and puffy, you remove that wrapper or the towel and we need to bake. This bread is going to bake at 350 for 40 minutes. With any bread recipe, you want to check the temperature before you take it out, especially with a loaf of bread. It can sometimes be underdone. It can sometimes take all the way up to 50 minutes. So check the internal temperature. What you're looking for is somewhere between 195 and 200 degrees, and then you know that it's baked all the way through. Right away, you remove it from the bread pan to let it cool. Let it cool at least 2 hours before you slice it. Now, as far as freezing goes, if you're making the whole loaf to freeze, you can let it cool totally and completely and then wrap it up whole, or you can let it cool, slice it, and then wrap it up to freeze. Just make sure when you're freezing bread, it has completely cooled to room temperature. If you wrap it up to freeze it when it's still warm, it's gonna start condensing, and then that condensation will freeze and you'll get ice crystals on the bread. So don't do that. Make sure it is totally cooled before it goes in the freezer. So I hope you like this recipe. It is fun for something that's just a little bit different than your average bread recipe, and it's not hard to make. You just need to get pineapple juice and those other kind of weird ingredients. Have fun with it. It's a great one for spring and summer. So have a really good day and have a good time baking.